What if I told you that many of your prayers go unanswered, not because God doesn't hear you, but because you're talking to Him the wrong way? How often have you asked yourself, why doesn't God seem to be answering my prayers? Or am I praying the right way? Maybe you've made heartfelt requests and still seen no change. What if the problem isn't with God, but with the way you're connecting with Him? Today, I'm going to reveal what few people understand about true prayer and... No, it's not about pretty words or empty repetition. There is a powerful secret that turns simple words into a real connection with the Father. And I want to share it with you. Stay with me to the end of this video, because what you're about to discover could change the way you pray and, more importantly, change your life. Because it's not enough to talk, you have to talk the right way. Have you ever felt alone when talking to God? As if your words were rising to heaven and then falling to the ground unanswered? Maybe you've asked yourself, does He really hear me? Or am I doing something wrong? This doubt is more common than you might think. The truth is that many pray expecting an immediate answer, forgetting that communication with the Father goes beyond loose words or hasty requests. When I was among you, I noticed how people sought the divine in haste, believing that repeating memorized phrases was enough to receive an answer. But the connection with God is not made by ready-made formulas or automatic gestures. It comes from sincerity and inner stillness. Many people get lost in empty requests or words full of fear and despair, and that's when the answer doesn't seem to come. The Father, in His infinite wisdom, is not a distant being who only listens to those who talk pretty or follow strict rituals. He listens to the heart. And if there is noise in you or fear or an attempt to manipulate events, you are out of tune with Him. Just as two people trying to talk in a noisy storm can barely hear each other, your troubled mind can prevent you from hearing God's quiet and loving presence. Remember something important. God is not a judge waiting for your right words to act. He is a Father who watches the intent behind your words. If your words are guided by fear, haste, or simple habit, they become like leaves blown by the wind without direction. What many people don't realize is that praying goes far beyond asking. It's about opening up, listening, and trusting. Once a man came to me with tears in his eyes and said, "I've been praying for years and nothing changes." As I looked at him, I realized that his prayers were always pleading, full of fear and doubt. I explained that true prayer is not an act of desperation, but of surrender. It's like a child who trusts in the care of his parents, even though he doesn't understand everything around him. When you pray in doubt, it's like planting a seed and digging it up every day to see if it has grown. How can it grow like that? Another common misconception is to look for immediate answers, as if God were a quick order taker. The Father's time is not the same as ours. What appears to be delay is often care. The answer may come in a different way than you expect. It may be a new way of looking at a problem, an unexpected encounter, or even a silence that invites you to reflect. But in order to recognize it, you need to calm your mind and open your heart. What if I told you that sometimes the best answer is silence? Not because God ignores it, but because He wants you to find within yourself the strength that has already been given. Often when you stop asking and just remain silent in His presence, that's when peace comes to you. It's in that empty space of words that He fills with love and wisdom. Imagine a friend who only comes to you to ask for something. Over time, that relationship becomes tiresome, doesn't it? It's the same with the Father. He wants a relationship of love and trust, not just a monologue of requests. When was the last time you approached Him just to say thank you, or just to be in His presence without saying a word? This is the essence of true prayer, an encounter, not just a request. When you understand this, you begin to realize that prayer is not about convincing God to do something, but about aligning yourself with what is already being provided. It's about opening your eyes to see that the answers are often all around you, just waiting for you to see them. True prayer is not a cry in the dark, but an intimate conversation with someone who knows you better than you know yourself. And when this understanding takes hold, the way you talk to God changes. You no longer feel the need to multiply words because you know that He already knows your heart before you say anything. It becomes easier to trust, to rest, and to realize That perhaps the mistake was never the lack of an answer, but the way we sought it. There's an even more important aspect that many people overlook, and it has to do with the way you express yourself before Him. It's not always the content of the prayer that keeps the answer away, but the automatic repetition and the lack of true intention. How do you speak to the Father in such a way that He really listens and you feel that living connection? The answer may not be what you expect, but it's easier and more powerful than you think. How often have you found yourself repeating the same prayer without realizing it? Saying words that come out of your mouth but don't touch your heart. Many people believe that praying is just saying familiar phrases, reciting memorized texts, or following a pattern taught since childhood. But I ask you, how can there be a true connection if the heart is not present? Repeating words without feeling is like talking to someone without looking into their eyes. It lacks life. It lacks truth. When I saw the crowds praying mechanically, I noticed the distance between their lips and their hearts. Words spoken by rote don't reach the Father. It's not the number of words or their eloquence that touches God's heart, but the sincerity hidden in each word. You can pray for hours, but if your words are empty, it's like a bell ringing for no reason. God isn't impressed by long speeches. He moves in front of open hearts. I remember a woman who once came to me and said that she prayed every day, but felt distant from God. As I listened to her, I realized that her prayers were full of automatic repetitions, said while her mind was wandering with worries. I explained to her that praying is like writing a personal letter to the Father, a message that must carry its essence, not just pretty words. When prayer becomes an empty habit, it loses its power. It's common for many people to cling to memorized words, believing that the more they pray, the faster they will be heard. But this is a mistake. God doesn't measure the value of your prayer by how many times you repeat something. He's looking for truth, and the truth is that prayer doesn't have to be long or elaborate. Sometimes a simple, "Father, I need you," said, with an open heart is more powerful than 1,000 words thrown to the wind. Imagine you have a friend who, whenever he sees you, repeats the same story with the same words, day after day. After a while, it loses its meaning, doesn't it? Now think what it would be like if that friend sat down with you, looked you in the eye, and spoke sincerely about what he was feeling. That's what the Father expects, a real conversation, not an empty monologue. Prayer is about opening your heart, not memorizing a text. I know that people often pray in a hurry in the middle of the day, trying to fit God into their busy schedules. But is that how you would want to be treated if you were listening to someone? Prayer is a sacred moment, a bridge that connects your soul to the divine, and that bridge only holds if it is built with attention and truth. When you pray hastily or automatically, that bridge weakens. I once told you that when you pray, you don't need to multiply words like those who think they will be heard by talking too much. This doesn't mean that it's wrong to ask, but that prayer should not be an act of desperation or an attempt to convince God with empty words. He already knows what you need before you even ask. So why not use prayer to open up and align yourself with the love that is already available to you? Maybe you're wondering, if not by repetition, how should I pray? The answer is simple: with your heart. Speak as you would to a close friend, someone who knows you at your core and doesn't need complicated explanations. Don't be afraid to reveal your weaknesses, your doubts, your pain. The Father is not offended by your sincerity. On the contrary, that's where He comes closest. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not what you say, but what you feel when you say it. If your words are full of fear, doubt, or suspicion, your prayer loses power. But if even in the midst of difficulty, you choose to speak with confidence and surrender, something changes. Not because God needs to be convinced, but because you become open to receive what He already wants to give you. Recognize that prayer is not about perfect words, but about a heart seeking true connection. Don't worry about what to say, just be sincere. Even if it is just a few words, if they are spoken with truth, they will reach heaven. And more importantly, they will transform you from within. When this understanding takes hold, a new way of communicating with God is revealed, and when that happens, you realize that there is an even more powerful way to connect with Him, not just by speaking, but by feeling. And that's when prayer becomes more than words. It becomes a living, transforming encounter. There is something that many people don't realize. It is not the words that touch the Father's heart, but the sincerity that flows from within. You can speak beautiful, long and well-crafted sentences, but if there is no truth behind them, they become empty sounds. God doesn't look for rehearsed speeches. What really reaches him is true devotion, the kind that comes from the depths of the soul even when words fail. When you open up with sincerity, it's as if the veil that separates your soul from the divine presence is lifted. It's not the way you speak, nor the beauty of what you say. It's the honesty with which you reveal your joys, fears, hopes, and pains. Even a sigh of truth can be a more powerful prayer than a long speech. The Father doesn't judge the way you speak, but welcomes what you say with your heart stripped of its masks. I once saw a simple man, his hands calloused from work, look up to heaven and simply say, "I don't know how to pray, but you know what I feel." And in that moment, his sincerity went deeper than any words could express. It's not a question of knowing how to speak, but of wanting to be heard with your soul exposed. The Father understands every tear, every unspoken thought, every silence filled with feeling. Imagine a child running into his parents' arms without saying anything, just looking for comfort. This is the prayer that moves God's heart, the prayer that comes from trust. When you turn to him with a sincere heart, it's as if you were saying, "Here I am, with all my faults and my hopes. Take me in." And he always does. He always does. Many believe that they must hide their faults or feelings when they pray, as if it were possible to deceive the one who knows even their deepest thoughts. There's no need to try to appear strong before him. If you're tired, say so. If you are afraid, confess it. If you're lost, admit it. The Father is not surprised by your weaknesses. He knows them and expects you to give them to him. That's the key. Don't hide them, reveal them. I've noticed that people often cling to the idea that they deserve to be heard. But God's love is not a reward. It's a constant gift. Your sincerity doesn't have to be perfect, just true. Even if you're confused, he understands what you're trying to say, even if your words are few or flawed. It's not about deserving. It's about opening up with humility and trust. Sometimes people ask me, "How can I tell if God is listening to me?" And I answer, feel the peace that comes into your heart when you give yourself without reservation. That peace is the Father's silent response, saying, it's not always an audible voice or a visible sign. Sometimes it's an inexplicable calm in the midst of chaos, a certainty that comes from nothing, an invisible embrace that envelops you in silence. Sincere prayer is like a seed planted in the fertile soil of the heart. You may not see it grow right away, but in time the transformation appears, and this transformation begins within you first. When you pray sincerely, you're not just talking to God, you're drawing closer to him in a way that words can never describe. It's an encounter that calms, renews, and strengthens, and make no mistake, being honest doesn't mean being perfect. Sometimes your prayer may be filled with anger, sadness, or confusion, and that's okay. The Father does not reject a heart that comes to him with authenticity. What he doesn't want is a proud heart that refuses to open. So don't be afraid to bring everything you feel to him, even what you think he won't understand, because he does. He always does. And it's in this sincere surrender that something extraordinary happens. Prayer stops being an isolated act and becomes an ongoing conversation. You begin to perceive God in the small details, in the answers that arise in everyday life, in someone's words, in the silence of the morning, or in an unexpected comfort. The connection becomes alive, present, and constant. Understanding this is the first step toward transforming not only your way of praying, but your whole life. And as this truth settles in your heart, a natural question arises. If sincere prayer is so powerful, how can I talk to God in a way that deepens this connection? There is a way to make this conversation not only true, but intimate and transformative. Talking to God doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the simpler and more truthful you are, the deeper the connection will be. Many people approach him with fear, thinking that they must choose difficult words or have an impeccable ritual in order to be heard. But the Father is not interested in your performance. He wants your heart. It's like talking to someone who loves you unconditionally. You don't have to pretend or hide anything. Just be yourself. When I was among you, I taught that prayer shouldn't be done to impress the people around you. I saw many standing in squares and temples, speaking loudly, choosing beautiful words to be seen and admired. But I said to them, when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and talk to the Father in secret, because true prayer is intimate, not a show. God appreciates what is said in the silence of the heart, away from human eyes and judgments. It's not about memorizing canned phrases or repeating formulas. It's about opening your soul and talking to someone who knows you better than you know yourself. Imagine being with a friend who always listens to you without rushing, who understands you even before you've finished speaking. That's the relationship the Father wants to have with you. And you know what the secret is? Speak to Him as you would to someone you trust, with whom you can be completely honest. When you're happy, thank Him with simple words. If you're suffering, don't hide it. Lord, I'm tired, help me. There is no right way to speak other than sincerity. The Father doesn't expect perfect speech. He expects you, with your faults, your doubts, your fears, and also with your hope. Every true word spoken from the heart will be heard. None of them is lost. One day a woman came to me ashamed to pray aloud. She thought her prayer was weak because she didn't know the right words. I looked into her eyes and said, it's not the words that move God's heart, but the faith behind them. And that is still true today. You may not know how to begin, but if you speak with an open heart, you'll be doing exactly what the Father expects. Another important thing to remember is that prayer is not just a time for asking. How many times have you talked to God just to say thank you, or just to share your feelings? There is nothing more beautiful than a heart that goes to the Father not just to find solutions, but to be with Him. A relationship with God is built not only in times of need, but also in the routine in everyday life, in the details of life. What's more, talking to God is also listening. How often have you finished your prayer and left in a hurry without taking time for silence? The Father speaks in many ways, in a feeling of peace, in a word someone says, in a thought that suddenly comes to mind. Be attentive. Don't make prayer a monologue. Give yourself space to listen to the answers, which sometimes come in ways you can't even imagine. If you want to change the way you pray, start by devoting some time to this moment. It doesn't have to be long. 5 minutes of sincerity is worth more than an hour of words. Breathe, close your eyes, and speak to Him as you would to a loving Father. You don't have to understand everything or have all the answers. You just need to be present and willing to open up. Prayer, when done from the heart, is like a bridge that brings you closer to the love, wisdom, and peace that the Father wants to give you. And the more you practice this real conversation, the more you will realize that God is not a distant being. He is close by, listening to every word, welcoming every sigh. Even at times when you think He is silent, He is working on your behalf, often in ways that are invisible to your eyes. And as this connection grows stronger, you begin to realize that praying is not just talking or listening. It's living. It's living. It's allowing your words to become actions, your faith to be reflected in your daily life. And when prayer goes beyond the lips and becomes practice, something extraordinary happens. Prayer is not just a private moment in your day, nor is it an act that ends when you say Amen. True prayer begins with words, but is completed in action. After all, what's the point of asking for patience and then getting angry about little things? Or to ask for love and compassion in the silence of prayer, and then when you leave the house, treat someone with indifference. The Father doesn't just look for what comes out of your mouth, but what overflows from your heart and manifests itself in your behavior. When you pray sincerely, something changes in you. Prayer is like a seed planted in fertile soil, watered. With faith and cultivated with daily attitudes, it grows and bears visible fruit. It's no use asking for peace and feeding arguments, asking for strength and giving up at the first obstacle. Prayer is a commitment to what you ask for, and that commitment is revealed when you begin to act on your words. I remember a man who asked for wisdom every day, but kept making rash decisions, driven by anger and haste. One day he asked me, "Why doesn't God give me what I ask for?" And I told him, The Father gives you opportunities to use wisdom, but it's up to you to choose to act on it. That's how prayer works. Sometimes the answer doesn't come as you expect, but in situations that invite you to practice what you've asked. Turning prayer into life means understanding that every word you speak before God is a commitment to the truth you want to live. If you ask for love, practice it. If you ask for forgiveness, offer it. If you ask for hope, be a source of hope for those around you. Praying is like turning on a light within you. Acting on that prayer is taking that light to light the way for others. The most powerful prayer is not one that consists of many words, but one that inspires true transformation. When you begin to live what you pray for, you realize that change doesn't just happen on the outside, but first and foremost on the inside. And this inner transformation is the first step to seeing the world around you transformed as well. Many people pray for a better world, but they forget that this world begins with every gesture, every word, and every attitude. The Father wants your prayer to be more than a request. He wants it to be a reflection of what you want to build. If you want to see more kindness, be kind. If you want to find understanding, practice listening. If you're looking for light, choose not to feed the darkness with complaints or judgments. There was a woman who prayed incessantly for peace in her home, but was always impatient with her children and husband. When I showed her that her prayer needed to be translated into small acts of patience and affection, she understood that the miracle she was looking for began with her. Sometimes the answer you've been waiting for is already in your hands, in the form of a different choice, a more loving look, a gesture of kindness. To live prayer is to carry this connection with God with you every moment of the day. It's knowing that the conversation with the Father doesn't end when you get up from your place of prayer. It continues when you offer a smile to a stranger, when you forgive even without being apologized to, when you choose to help even without being asked. It is in these attitudes that prayer becomes life. And when that happens, you don't just talk to God, you begin to realize that He also talks to you through others, through situations, and even through silence. The peace you so desperately seek ceases to be a distant goal and becomes part of your being. The love you ask of the Father becomes the love you offer, and so you become not just someone who prays, but someone whose whole life has become a living prayer. In the end, praying is not an isolated act. It's a choice to live in harmony with the love and truth that the Father has already placed within you. And when your words and actions go hand in hand, something extraordinary happens. You realize that the answer you've been seeking has always been there, waiting to be experienced. It's time to understand a truth that can change your life forever. God doesn't just want to hear your words. He wants to feel your heart. Prayer isn't just talking, it's surrender. It's not repeating, it's living. Each word spoken with sincerity is a bridge that brings you closer to the love that is already available to you. The Father is not far away. He is closer than you think, just waiting for you to really connect. Don't let your prayers be just empty sounds. Make them a reflection of your faith, your surrender, your trust. Live what you ask for. Be the answer to your own prayers. The world around you may not change immediately, but when you change inside, everything around you begins to change. Today you have the opportunity to turn every thought, gesture, and word into a living prayer. Speak to God as one who trusts, act like one who believes, and live like one who knows He's never been alone. May your path be illuminated, and may you discover the peace that dwells within you. May love walk with you, may truth guide you, and may the divine light shine in every step you take. Go and be a light in the world, for the Father has already placed within you all that you need to be a source of love and transformation. You are loved, you are heard, and most of all, you are never alone. May it be so. Amen.